I am Megan, and welcome to One Book, One New Orleans 2023 Kickoff, y'all. So I've got this really big grin on my face right now. It's because this is our first in-person beginning of the year kickoff since 2023. Thank you all for coming out and showing some love to One Book, One New Orleans. For those of you who don't know who we are, I'm going to give the quickest spiel possible to tell you about who we are and what we do. One Book, One New Orleans selects one book every year. We encourage everyone in the city to read the same book at the same time, with the idea that we're going to grow stronger as a community through a shared reading experience. When we do that, we have to recognize that approximately 27% of the adults in our city struggle with literacy. So if we are going to be One Book, One New Orleans, we have to find a way to reach that 27% and invite everyone into the fold. So we develop a curriculum around the book, and we get the curriculum and the book free of charge into the hands of adult learners throughout the city. This book is being used in right now 6 adult ed programs to teach adults to read. It's also in the ears of the blind and print handicapped through a partnership with WRBH Reading Radio. It is in both adult and juvenile prisons, so that it's being used to teach those folks who are going through education programs in those facilities as well. It's also at the public library, at least 3 copies per branch, so that if your barrier to accessing the book is that you can't afford it, we make sure it's available in your area for free. And then we have a series of free family-friendly events such as this to bring all readers from all walks of life together. You'll never see us in person in the same neighborhood twice in a calendar year because we want to eliminate transportation barriers to our programming. And they'll always be in child-friendly spaces so that we eliminate childcare barriers as well. Now that's where I would have stopped in 2020. But what do you do during a global pandemic, y'all? You accidentally expand your outreach. Sure, that's what you do. So in 2020, we started getting calls from folks all over the place who had lost their access to books when the public schools and the public libraries shuttered. So we started collecting donated books, any donated books in new or good condition, and getting those books to our community partners who were serving folks who are living below the poverty line and really love to read, but that public library closed or that public school closed. So thanks to a partnership with DePaul Community Health Center, we brought them to those 10 clinics, and now when they get their health care, they get a free book. We also brought them to the juvenile prisons because we started recognizing that in prison, lockdown is social distancing. So they were devouring books. So we started doing that. We've done over 7,000 collected and distributed books since the pandemic began. So, thanks. And that's us, increasing access to books and breaking down barriers to literacy wherever we can, however we can, and particularly celebrating one book throughout the year that brings the city together. And what's that one book this year, y'all?
Don't say they love you.
There we go, the ones who don't say they love you. Thank you. By Maurice Carlos Ruffin. We're so excited. The author's here tonight. Maurice is going to read. He'll be followed by Karisma Price. And to tell you more about these 2 fine people is board member Liz Granite, who is also our events committee co-chair and helps do all of this. Give it up for Liz.
Thank you so much, everybody. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you tonight and to introduce 2 incredibly talented writers and genuinely delightful individuals. Karisma Price is a poet, screenwriter, media artist, and author of I'm Always So Serious, which is now available for pre-order. You could actually order it here tonight. Her work has appeared in Oxford American, Poetry, 4-Way Review, Wildness, Adroit Journal, and elsewhere. She is a Cave Canem Fellow, was a finalist for the 2019 Manchester Poetry Prize, and was awarded the 2020 J. Howard and Barbara M.J. Wood Prize from the Poetry Foundation. She is from New Orleans, and she holds an MFA in Poetry from New York University, where she was a Writers in the Public Schools Fellow. She is currently an assistant professor of poetry at Tulane University. Yeah, show some love.
Next up. Hold up. So wait. Y'all see, Karisma's book is so great, you gotta clap even more.
All right, and Maurice Carlos Ruffin is the author of our One Book, One New Orleans 2023 selection, The Ones Who Don't Say They Love You. It was a New York Times Editor's Choice, a finalist for the Ernst J. Gaines Award for Literary Excellence, and longlisted for the Story Prize. Maurice's first book, We Cast a Shadow, was a finalist for the PEN Faulkner Award, the Dayton Literary Peace Prize, and PEN America Open Book Prize. It was longlisted for the 2021 Dublin Literary Award, the Center for Fiction Prize, and the Aspen Words Literary Prize. The novel was also a New York Times Editor's Choice. His work has appeared in the New York Times, the LA Times, Oxford American, Garden and Gun, Kenyon Review, and 400 Souls, A Community History of African America. This New Orleans native is also a professor of creative writing at Louisiana State University, and as though that weren't enough, he writes Sitting in Silence, the newsletter on creativity, writing, joy, and worry, because why not, y'all? All right, let's give it up for Maurice and Karisma.
Anybody seen Glass Onion yet?
Yes.
Onion? Have you seen that? We have a slight mystery in the house tonight. In the chaos of getting ready for this, my compatriot, my twin is Karisma. She have the same glasses and the same birthday. Apparently her jacket's out there somewhere. So you've seen her jacket.
I had a nice, I wanted to look fancy, and then my jacket disappeared. I'm like,
Are you finished?
Oh look, we found a jacket. Yay! All right, so now I can actually like some intro music properly. We try to. Surprise! Maurice Ruffin, Mama Jen, Miss Vera. We should probably start, right?
yeah.
Oh, that's right. I gotta read something, okay? It's kind of embarrassing. I actually left my book. But then fate tends to work out. A friend actually mailed me this today. It's a copy of my book that needs to be signed. So I'm gonna use that. All right. How you doing tonight? You doing all right?
Yes.
Isn't One Book, One New Orleans great?
Yes.
Isn't McHardy's chicken great? Isn't community books that are great? So I got to that age finally where I didn't wear glasses my whole life, even though I actually wanted to wear glasses to look more intellectual. So now I have glasses. But then the irony is that these are not reading. I don't need them for reading. They're for like distance, so I can see who's at the back. Who's back. All right. So thank y'all for being here tonight. This is such a lovely moment. I just feel so honored that this book was selected to be distributed throughout the community. This book has 19 stories, which are my labor of love. Before I actually finished my first book, which is my novel called We Cast a Shadow, I was writing these stories. And these stories took about 10 years to write. And the framework, the goal for this book was to have stories about this community, particularly my African American community, so that I think 18 to 19 feature African American leads. And a lot of writers have like a lot of autobiographical stuff. I wanted to like not have myself here, so to speak, so that there's like this, there's like not a lot of lawyers who like drive BMWs in this book. That was me like 10 years ago. But like a lot of my classmates are here, my cousins are in here, my aunties, my uncles, my all my grands are in here. And so I think I reached something short to get to the Q&A. We had some more chicken and other stuff.
Don't sit on your glasses.
I would totally do that. I would totally do that, yes. Like crunch,
I heard you talking about your glasses, like you just started wearing them and I can't.
Thank you.
I've been trying to put two.
You can tell we've done so many events together over the years. All right, so I'm going to read a short one. This is this book has 19 stories, 6 flash fiction pieces, 1 novelette. I'm going to read one of the flash pieces that I really like, but there's a lot of stories that I kind of like in here. quick question. Has anybody here read Ghetto University yet? Ghetto University, I see some heads nodding. That's the craziest story. But it takes like 30 minutes to read, so I can't read it. But there is a podcast audio performance version, which is wonderful. So find that. It's just like on Spotify or whatever. It's Disha Filial's podcast. Disha Filial.
The Ursa podcast.
The Ursa podcast. This is Murphy Forges, which is actually one of the oldest stories in here. It's only 3 pages long. And it's like the only Katrina story, like the quote-unquote Katrina story. So 2007, when I was still a corporate lawyer, I met a guy named Murphy Forges. There's nothing that's about him here, but his name is just so cool. All right. Mercury Forges. My job was to make sure Murphy Forges didn't escape. He was a stocky black guy, in for drugs and guns. He'd gotten out of Orleans Parish prison twice, and no one knew how he did it. Funny thing is, he got captured within a few blocks of the prison both times, right down there. I get turned around when I get out there, Def Benoit. Mercury said once, but I'll get free for good. Just you wait. When the hurricane hit and flooded everything, we brought the inmates out to the Broad Street overpass. For the newbies, that's Broad Street right there. Just go down there about half mile. All right, there we go. I wasn't too panicked because one of the other deputies, Ronnie Dismas, said our families had made it out of town before that water came. It'd be so much easier to look after myself without my family in harm's way. Mercury snuck away as soon as I turned my back on him. He was in a P-road, about 5 blocks away, bobbing like an apple. I ran across the overpass and climbed down the scaffolding to his boat, which I grabbed. Now, we hadn't cuffed these guys, these inmates. It would be too hard to move them around with all the climbing we had to do to find dry land with that flooding. Where do you think you're going, Mercury? I asked. I had my hand on my gun. Gotta find Humanity Street, man, he said. My pops lives down there. Now, I knew his dad, and that shouldn't have mattered at all. I had a job to do, right? His dad was a good guy. He gave us our lunch plates every single day. But whatever. I can't really tell you why I didn't make Mercury bring us back to the detention area immediately. And after a while, we floated up to a yellow house with flood water almost to the awning. Mercury yanked a metal pole from the water, broke through the attic, and climbed in. They were shuffling inside, and I wondered if I should go in after him. I thought this might be a part of his big getaway plan. But soon he grunted out of the window and pulled his father's body out wrapped in a heavy blanket. The old man hadn't stood a chance. Bring us back, Deb, said Mercury. And that's what I did. All right, we'll stop there for now. So what we talking about now?
Hey.
So, has anybody seen that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Yes.
You know, the directors of these 2 guys called the Daniels? So we're birthday twins, September 20th.
We're the Septembers.
We're the Septembers. So, you know, the first public presentation of September.
You get to see our text message thread, like in person.
Yeah.
We're the same person, just
like,
you know, I have more hair, but it's fine.
It's like a little switch, like we were even, and then like they went like that, and she got all of the.
You got the hair, you got the height.
You got the same glasses though.
Do you need them?
I'll take them back.
See all the beautiful people.
All beautiful people. Does
Hi
it work?
everybody. How y'all doing? Hi. It's such an honor to be here. It's gonna be really fun. Thank you for coming. Well, it's cold for New Orleans standards, but it's fine. So, I have some questions prepared, but some,
Is it grilling?
no. I won't roast you in front of all these people.
I better hydrate.
Also, can everyone hear my voice? No. Okay, all right, thank you. How about now?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna shout it. Hi, I'm Karisma. Before we start, how's your heart? How you doing? What's brought you joy today?
This sweater, I got this in Harlem around like 2016 or so. It just brings me so much joy. You know, clothes can like make you feel a certain kind of way, right? So, you know, in this city, you have like maybe 10 chances to wear this per year. So it's like my second time wearing it this season, so I feel very good about it. And of course, you know, being here with everybody, I mean, so many friends and like family, you know, cousins, twins. Everybody's up here right now. So
McHardy's chicken.
McHardy's chicken.
I ask my students that all the time. I make them do like adult show and tell, where it's like they have to present on something that's brought them wonder or joy recently. So we are in, I don't even know if to call them troubling times anymore. Life is life, and so I like to start that off.
All right.
So I have some questions. You answered some of them.
Already?
Yeah,
Like just 9?
like in the intro.
Oh, okay. That's probably, look, you know what? Music just happens around me constantly. It's a part of music. We have like a personal soundtrack wherever we go. I'm using the raw we right now.
Alright, so I have some questions. I didn't want to read from my phone, so I quickly wrote them down. But in the intro, you talked about a lot of the stories in the collection are, you know,
You lost your voice.
Yeah.
You talk in the collection about how a lot of the people, a lot of the characters in the stories are your cousins, aunts, uncles, just your whole community. I guess I wanted to know that maybe that answered the question a bit, but your own personal literary canon. When we talk about the canon, it's often very Eurocentric and Plato and da-da-da-da-da. And I think everyone has, or every writer should have their own personal canon. So who are you writing for or against? We like
Against?
Yeah.
You're bringing that smoke tonight, huh? All right. I mean, I think every writer goes through a, first of all, writers are readers first. And like Mama Jim was saying a few minutes ago, the more I read, the less I know, which is a good thing. Because, you know, in a lot of the high school curriculum of the 1990s when I was in school, you're going to get like a certain kind of a writer. And they're all excellent writers. I can name, you know, John Updike and Philip Roth and, you know, all the Johns and the John Cheever, you know, that kind of thing. And then at some point, somebody comes and says, you know, there's a whole other universe of books out here you should be reading. And so I had the good fortune of going to McDonald 35, which is a historically black high school here in the city. It's like 99.9% black. And so I got some Octavia Butler, you know, I got, you know, some Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, obviously. Maya Angelou, read all 4 of her autobiographies like in a year. Who does 4 autobiographies? She does, because she can. But like, who would I write for? So my best friend in high school was this dude named Quentin Gorman. He was from New York, came down to New Orleans, put me on like Wu-Tang Clan, like Tribe, like in the early days, like in the early 90s. Well, right now, I'm looking at you. So, I mean, should I call you Quentin's auntie? What should I call? All right, so Quentin's auntie is here right now. I haven't seen you probably in what, like 15, 20? Wow. It's been a minute. It's so good to see you tonight. Y'all say hello to Quentin's auntie. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, when I'm writing, I think what I was trying to say is this. Every writer is a reader first, then you become a writer. You're collecting these tools from different writers in the universe. Again, your Alice Monroe, you know, your Alice Monroe's, your Alice Walker's, Toni Morrison's, your John Updike's, whoever you want to name, and then you bring those skills back to the community that you come from. If you're lucky, you're able to show where you come from to people who don't know what your people are like. I mean, to this day, thanks to, I don't know, Aeschylus, we can tell you what some Greeks were like 2,500 years ago. And that's him describing the town he lived in. And it's like, I'm from Athens, that kind of thing. That's pretty freaking cool that we can still know what that's like. Some cities are kind of overexposed. You know, I'm not throwing shade at New York City. You know, New York is New York, right? But there's probably, you know, 10,000 people writing novels right now, short story collections right now in New York. It's well covered. You know, if you want to know what New York's like, you can just pick 5 random books. And this city has less of that. We have, you know, many good writers, but I think that we need to make sure we're getting good coverage. I'm just one perspective. So if you're a writer in this city, or you've come to this city, you know, write your pieces, put them out. You know, use these voices, the people that's in your life, to create stories that present like not a French Quarter version of it, like not a Mardi Gras version of it, but like a true version of it. And that's really my goal. Again, it's always like my mama's voice. You know, we hung out. I was late because of her. We was hanging out.
Same.
My mama too. You see, it's always the mamas, right? But that's okay. You know, I brought her, you know, errands shopping and to get her medicine, stuff like that. Just having a good time. Her voice is all over that book. She's like half the characters almost.
And in the hardcover, her handwriting is on the cover.
That's right. If you get the hardcover of that book, which is, I think, maybe sold out, but it says stories. That's my mama's handwriting right on the cover. So I think that's kind of an answer to the question.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, it is. Let's see. You already answered part of this, but I guess what does it mean to be a Black New Orleanian telling your own story? And do you feel like you got, well, you're gonna write a whole bunch of books until you die, but do you feel like you got, I mean, I don't know, maybe not.
All right, maybe not. it can like do an AI version of me. You just
Yeah.
keep writing forever.
AI has been in some trouble
A
recently.
little
But when it comes to writing, I feel like everybody has their own New Orleans in their head, and like you said, you can tell when someone either not from New Orleans or hasn't spent a lot of time there has been like writing like from there. Do you have a favorite story in the collection that you feel really exemplifies New Orleans?
I mean, I mentioned it earlier. Look, there's so many. Like, you ask me different days, I have different favorites, different best stories I've written, different ones that exemplify the city. But I feel like Ghetto University. So I was in, I got the bag here. So I was in, I'll show you this. I was in Key West at the Literary Festival about a week ago, right? And this was a cool festival. It was the 40th anniversary of the festival, and it was paying tribute to African American writers in this country. And I was on stage, and somebody, I won't name who, you can find it yourself, but I don't want to embarrass nobody. But somebody tells a story about how they was visiting New Orleans, and they were in an Uber, and the lady driving the Uber was a black lady, and this lady sort of turns to the passenger and says, "I can see your soul. I know what you're experiencing right now. You're going through pain right now," like this and this whole sort of thing, right? And then the person on the stage is like, "And I felt so seen." And I'm thinking, no, you were getting read. So a story like Ghetto University, which is in the book, if you don't know the story yet,
Give us a quick summary.
the quick summary of
Without
Ghetto
spoilers.
University, no spoilers, is that you have a professor of English at UNO. UNO shout out in the house, right? UNO. So he gets laid off from UNO, right? And he has to make rent. So to make rent, he stumbles across this ability. If he's wearing a hoodie, like normally he has like a tweed jacket with like the patches, but if he puts a hoodie on, people think he's a criminal. So he's like to start throwing money at him. So he starts going through the French Quarter, just like getting money thrown at him like that. And then meanwhile, well, I won't give the wife twist, but there's all these twists in the story. My point is, like, in a city that has this history, on the one hand, that's very negative of like, I guess like white supremacy creating certain effects of like economic inequality. But on the other hand, it's sort of like tricksterous, jokerish side to it. This sort of like Brer Rabbit side to it. I saw a dude in the French Quarter about a year ago. I never forget this dude. I'm like off the cater, and this brother walking down the street minding his business. And then he did that Kevin Spacey in Usual Suspect. His body language changes, and he's these two tourists. They look pretty wealthy, like jewelry and hats. And he kind of does that thing. "Hey, I bet you I can tell you where you got your shoes at." Like change his whole personality, right? And they kind of nervous, but they sort of know what the deal is. They give him like $5. They walk away. He turns around and like he just goes back straight up and just kind of walks away normal. I'm like, that's New Orleans. So my point is, Ghetto University has a lot of those elements in it. It's not like a mean-spirited thing. It's like, look, we got to make a way out of no way. Because of all the issues that are here, because we're often underfunded. Literacy is an issue obviously here. Mass incarceration. You see responses to that are often for the love of family, for the love of your closest intimates. And that story is all about that. It's a man and his wife trying to figure out how to just, draw water from a stone, basically. And it's funny as hell.
No, it is. You have a lot of, speaking of that, you have a lot of like parents as the narrators of the story. And there's a lot of children. There's like a variety of voices. So, yeah.
I didn't notice it.
So, when you're making a character, and I'm asking as a poet too, how do you ask them questions when you're trying to figure out who are you, what's your story, what part of the story should I tell? How do you ask them, I guess, do you find out who they are at their core after the story is written, or do you have to figure that out before you start writing?
None of us in this room, well, maybe with a couple of exceptions, really know each other very well. I mean, some of us have been friends for a couple of years, maybe, but if you've been married to somebody or have been partnered for like, say, 10 plus years, there's a point where you kind of go, I don't know this person very well. You think you do, but it's sort of courtship, and they're coming together, and this sort of agreement that you're going to like, cut each other slack and all that kind of stuff. But really, these skulls, they're like a separating thing from person to person to person. So I don't know my characters before I meet them. And what happens is I will literally ask my character, what's up? Like I see somebody walking down the street, I'm like, I wonder what their story is. And I just kind of imagine them telling me what's going on. I always say, what is the most important thing that ever happened to you your entire life? Tell me that story. I don't want the time you stub your toe or got a flat tire. I want that thing that you don't want to talk about. Like they'll start talking, I go, nope, that's not it. Keep on going, deeper, deeper, deeper. And they just like, well, you know what it really was? It was this. And often it's a moment in life that we all experience many times where you can look back 10, 15 years later and go, that changed my trajectory completely. It all changed from that point forward. So that's where I go with it. Doctor. What's up? Yo, we used to work. Look, there are so many good humans in here. I feel bad. I can't like just point out everybody in this room right now. I mean, like Laurence ran a book. What was like a book truck, a book van? Bookmobile. He was like throwing books out like ninja stars. take some books. And my man, we used to work together. And when he was a brand new lawyer from Harvard, right? From Harvard, we just like having a conversation. Next time he's taking over the firm. Then he's like, you know what? This firm thing is cool. I want to be an asset. I want to actually help the community. And now you're teaching. Well, you have been teaching. Is that right? Yeah. Welcome to the show. I'm sorry to bring you into it. Look, hey, bro, we got some chicken. We got some greens over here. You want something? Go ahead. Doc, there was some other questions.
I love this.
It's chaotic good.
Well, yeah, it's chaotic, but it's good.
Yeah.
So this book actually, you wrote the book. Go get the chicken. You wrote this book, or most of it, most of the collection, before. Wait, no. You wrote it before We Cast a Shadow, right?
Most of it.
Most of it.
Most of it.
Or you had the plans of publishing this one before We Cast a Shadow, which is his novel. You should also buy that one.
It's pretty good.
I guess, does this collection, I mean, we're celebrating it tonight. Does this collection feel old to you? Or how does it feel knowing that when you were writing these short stories before you completed the novel? I guess, what does it feel like? Does it feel different, like ordering wise, like writing something first versus publishing something first?
That's a good question. So does this book feel old in comparison? I mean, I think that a lot of writers write to the trend. You know, like certain musicians will like, they have like one style and they hear like someone on TikTok, I gotta use that beat or whatever like that. So when I made this book, for me, I designed this book to be timeless. I designed this book to be something that's gonna stand test. Like my thing is, look, if the book sells well now, that's great. If the book gets picked for some prize, that's great. But my heroes, I mean, I've already mentioned Aeschylus for crying out loud. I mean, 2,500 years ago. I can give you Enheduanna. I mean, she's the first known writer. She's from like 3000 BCE. To me, it's things that last over a long period that I have the real respect for. So I can't be here to see how the book does, but I really made it the kind of thing where, like me as a young person going to the main library on Loyola, right? And like finding books on the shelves and being like, oh, this was written for me, even though it's like made in 1938 or something like that. So I'm trying to have that kind of experience. I want to have the kind of experience in the writing where people will go, it doesn't really matter what year it is, it's speaking to me wherever I am right now. And many of those stories were written, say 2007 up to like 2016. A few were written between 2016 and 2021-ish. But really, it's just a matter of like, the writers I respect write these things that have no expiration date. Like my former student, Cree Petaway, who just walked in. What's up, Cree? How you doing? Cree is a brilliant writer, a brilliant like lecturer, teacher. Also, like you're really teaching now, right?
Yes.
How you doing?
For real.
How
Jade, as a matter of fact.
many educators in the house right now? I just want to know hands. We got hands for educators. Quite a few of them. I meant to give a shout out earlier to one of my mentors, Bernice, the only Bernice McFadden. So Bernice is back here.
Hey, Bernice.
Hey, Bernice. Teaches at Tulane with Karisma. Life goals. Like Bernice has 15, 16 books out already. I might get there in like 100 years, maybe at this rate. But I just always like and they're all wonderful books. So thank you for your mentorship.
Speaking of that, you're a professor in addition to he does like 20 different things every day. And I don't know how you sleep. Do you sleep?
Well, I wouldn't sleep except for the fact that I figured out you have to exhaust yourself. So usually I run 10 miles every couple of weeks or so, and I run throughout the week. Lately I've been going to the gym a lot just to like change my pace. So I've been like hawking it up. Yeah. And it's 10 right now, I'm like that. So it helps. But what I figured out is this. When you don't like what you're doing, it's hard to do anything. So when I was doing corporate law, I'm getting paid 6 figures, I'm driving my BMW, I got my nice suits, and I'm just like struggling, like just to get a brief out basically. And now it's like, let's see, I teach at LSU, I teach at Randolph Low Res, I'm writing a book that's coming out next year, I'm writing a book after that I've already written 2 drafts of. I got a 3rd book that I've written 2 drafts of. So they like in the hopper right now. I'm trying to do some poetry, trying to follow you with poetry, trying to do that too.
He writes very good poems too.
I try. I've been on a podcast with my friend Emily Strong here right now. I've been, I'm judging the contest this week. I'm judging the contest next week. I can go on and on and on. My point is, it doesn't feel effortful. It feels like lovely. I got a Substack. I didn't want a Substack. Why do I have a Substack? I saw this Substack a year ago, and I'm like, you know what? I just want to just say my thoughts and just see how it feels. It's done very well. It's got thousands of followers. It just all feels like it's of a piece. And when you're following that sort of that personal legend, like from that book, The Alchemist. Now I know it's a little cheesy, but I like the book a lot. But if you're following your personal legend, it just all tends to work out over time. So yeah, I feel energetic. I get 7-8 hours sleep per night.
That's really good.
I get a lot of sleep. I'm actually 80 years old. I just,
You got the Benjamin Button.
I'm going back.
So I want to ask you about poems, but before, I guess about ordering. Did you change? Did the order of the short stories change?
Oh.
How did you? Was there a certain way that you wanted the stories to read? I mean, I know we all put them in whether it's poems, stories, or whatever else, put certain things in orders for certain reasons. Did you have a specific way you wanted to order them, and how often did it change during the editing process?
I think with great books, not saying that I'm writing great books, although I am, but still, you can pick up a great book, you can just go to a random passage, you're like, I know that voice. I know who wrote that passage. And I think that also applies to how stories are ordered. Whether it's a novel, there's a linear, chronological order, or like a short story collection that kind of does whatever. So this is like a little interior craft thing for me. I figured out that I love albums, for example. I tend to take different genres and mediums constantly. So I love albums that start off hot. Like, whoa, what is that? Tribe Called Quest albums. The first time was always weird as hell. Why did, Steve Biko, just horns and violin stabs, Bjork, even Bob Dylan sometimes. The first song, all right, Bob, you were smoking something. But the point is, that's how my mind works with my books. So I want to grab you. My mentor, James Nolan, would always say, get them by the lapels and drag them into the story, and don't let go until they've gotten acclimated to the space. So my rule for the collection was that hot story. So I think Mama Jim was saying earlier, she's like, boy, that first story. I'm like, yeah, I hope so. The overall order, you get to a stage of writing a book where your brain is fried. You can't even see the pages anymore. And so my brilliant editor, Nicole Counts, who edited the book, in my next book, I just said, Nicole, look, I'm gonna put the order in your hand. Make sure the first story is the one that pops, and probably put the longest story towards the end, which is Never Let Me Up, before I let go. And other than that, you choose. And so she picked the order of the rest of the stories. And I think she has this sort of thing where she sort of inserts a flash piece here and there, and there's a poem in there somewhere too. And that's totally her. We'd have to ask her. I could call her, but she's probably at work in New York right now. Yo, Nicole, what's up?
You answered so many of my questions with that answer. Because I was going to ask, how does music influence you? You've told me that you listen to a song on repeat over and over and over when you're drafting, and you have at least, you have Ghetto University, Before I Let Go, 2 stories that are named after songs. I'm knowing you, I know you love music, you love comic books, you love anime. What else do you like? You like salads?
Yo, I had a salad.
You should, go
I had a salad 2 hours.
Tell them about the salad.
I had a salad 2 hours ago. It was a Rouse's buffet salad. Get that spinach and that kale with the beets and the...
Every day he makes a 20-pound salad.
Fills you up, not home.
Yeah. So, because I can't write with music with words in the background that accidentally get in the poem, and then I don't want to be sued. So, I'm gonna leave that to you.
You got a lawyer. I could defend you.
Oh yeah.
I got you, Tony.
All right, I got you. All right. So, I wanted to know. You already read. You snuck a poem in this collection. I wanted to know if you could read that poem or a story, whatever you want to call it. That's your business.
All right, we definitely need some music.
It's on page 97.
All right.
So he has a story in here called Spinning, and I read it and I'm like, this is a poem. I don't know, how'd you slip that past?
Yo, my editor was so cool. I'm like, I think I got a poem for this book. She's like, whatever you say, boss. No, but it's weird because that poem is actually probably, there's 3 or 4 stories that are very autobiographical, That poem is probably the most autobiographical one in the entire book, which is weird. My dad, wonderful man, passed years ago. He sold cars, and I remember being like 4 years old, and he would just like take the cars from the lot, like drive me around town, buying stuff. So that's what it is. So you want to read?
No.
Try to read that.
You read it.
I'm gonna read. All right, let's get some intro music ready. Spinning. 1. After my dad died, I bore his body from room to room. The cancer had flayed his flesh. I was shocked by his heaviness. His body pulled the cords of my back to their conclusions. He put a violin in my hands when I was small, and once I turned the peg as a note rose higher and higher until the E snapped against my arm, a caterpillar-shaped welt rising. 2. I refused my father just once. He asked me for a gift of a pack of cigarettes. Grandmother has had a heart attack, alone in the night, arteries hardened by Philip Morris. A surgeon slices my mother's breast to save her from cells gone to riot, chewing their way out of her body. I say, Father, I'll do this for you but once. Love is. 3. Mama cried for years after his death. His leaving ends our circling. Don't you miss him, son? The green wedge of a Salem's pack winks from her lap. After I fill my car's tank, the needle rises from E to F. Every cell of Mama's body, balloon-filled with heavy water. In my daydreams, she inhales, smoke nettles her lungs, then calls his true name. 0. 1982, I'm 4. Dad takes the wheel of a pickup truck he borrowed from work without permission, reaches over to clip me into the passenger seat, throws the transmission into drive, lights off down the ice-black rock road, a veteran's highway, watches my laughter at the witch's cackle of wind flowing through the cabin, misses his turn at Lafreniere Park, turns too fast, spins us at the intersection, 2 infants on the back of a mermaid, the fishtail whipping in the drizzle-made ponds, he reaching over to pin me in place as I think this will always be.
Let's give her a round.
It's so weird going into the poetry space.
You are a poet.
Like, you're an actual poet, though.
You're a poet too.
Wait till y'all see her book. You're gonna lose your minds.
No, he sent me like poems he wrote. He's like, let me know what you think. And I read one and I called him immediately after. The ending, like there was one that just floored me. I don't remember the name of it, but
The damn one, I think.
the thing. So he's coming for my job, and I don't know
No,
how.
I'll be your assistant. I'll be your assistant.
I noticed, well, for those of you who don't have the book, but as he read aloud, each section, so the first section is 1, then it's 2, then it's 3, then it's 0. How did you feel constructing the order of that?
A friend of mine in grad school, her name is Che Yulin. She had a wonderful story called 1 out of 10 fish can't swim. And it goes backwards in time, and it's numerically going backwards from like, I think 10 to like 1 or something like that. And that actually mostly goes chronology, because 0 is me at 4 years old, and I think 4 is me like at 38 years old. And so I'm getting younger and younger as the story goes. And I'm trying to go back through this thing that we don't really pay attention to, but the fact that, I mean, like I didn't even realize I wrote this poem. I mean, cigarettes just affected everybody in my family, and this idea of like drawing into this sort of pleasurable thing that gives you cancer, gives you an aneurysm, gives you a heart attack. And I'm like, whoa. I mean, writing can show you things about your life you don't see unless you just own in on it,
How does your poet brain differ from your fiction brain? Do you feel different when you're writing? Like when you, I guess the first question, when you sit down to write anything, do you have like a certain ritual or practice, and how did it feel venturing into this new genre?
Yeah, thank you for that. I've eschewed most rituals because I probably have a little bit of anxiety/OCD. So like, and I wrote about this in my Substack this week actually, so it's funny you asked that. But like I had like magic pens and special notebooks and a certain seat in a coffee shop and a certain level of like people talking and music in my headphones. And it was like I couldn't get the right mixture, I couldn't get the engine started, I just couldn't get it going. And so eventually I'm like, dude, this is not very efficient at all. You need to like just write, dude, just write, see what happens. And so I made that thing I said earlier, it's almost like seance process with the fiction where it's like, hey, what's happening? And then I started hearing them talking, like typing it out. What happened next? No, that's boring. What happened next? Oh, good. That kind of thing. With poetry, it does feel a little bit different because I feel so new to it, and I have this sort of, I have the beginner's respect for it. Like, I don't think I know what I'm doing at all with poetry, but what I do tend to do is I feel like there's an offering that I have to do with like time, where I will like clear a space out, in my place, put my laptop down, open it up, make sure the lighting's okay, and then it's kind of like watch the screen for a minute. And even like recall my favorite poets. I mean, I love Lucille Clifton, obviously. You know what I'm saying? I love so many poets out there, and I'm like, all right. So, and often what I do nowadays is I get those poem of day emails.
Yes. And
I get the old, I mean, he's not popular now, but I get the old Garrison Keillor emails where he like uses like one poem per day. But they're amazing poems. So I'll just like go and read somebody's poem and kind of go, all right, what's that vibe? And I mean, they're poets that I had sort of heard of, and from those two emails, I'll go, oh, that's why they're so revered and respected. And I just begin to sort of use that energy to create my own stuff. I mean, Charles Simic died, I think 2 weeks ago now. Mm-hmm. And he has this wonderful poem, I'm crazy about your shrimp or something like that. And it's like this middle-aged dude who's in a relationship, and it's kind of like ribald and kind of dirty, like kind of naughty. But he's like, I love her shrimp so much. And it's kind of ridiculous. Yeah. And I'm like, I want to write one of those kind of poems. So I wrote my own version of it. And I actually read it to my students at Randolph, Virginia. And I'm thinking I'm just like, embarrassing myself with this dumb poem. I look up and they're just like kind of cool. I'm like, okay, I didn't know that. But again, I feel like with poetry, I don't necessarily it's like in superhero movies when like your powers are not quite under control yet. You don't know what you're doing necessarily. So I'm still figuring that out. I'm trying to like fly, just kind of hop a little bit. Like early Superman.
I feel like you're writing a collection of poetry.
I am. I don't know what it is yet. I mean, I was writing stories. I didn't know what would go in this collection. This collection is actually missing many of my stories because I wanted to do a certain thing. I have sci-fi stories. I have stories set in the distant past, like the 1400s. I have stories that are set outside of New Orleans. Those are not in this collection on purpose, but you can find them online at lovely purveyors of fiction like, I don't know, what's that one? Kenyon Review, they have some nice stuff that I wrote. Massachusetts Review, but
not you flexing for the audience.
The stories have to go somewhere. I can't just keep them in my laptop.
Just a little magazine.
Yeah. Although the title, okay, so you brought it up. The title story did win. So I think everybody has to figure out how to sustain yourself. And for me as a corporate lawyer, I'm making good money and being, well fed. And I'm like, well, so how do you stop doing it? How do you stop having a job that's going to pay you so well just to write short stories that pay you $10 a pop? And so one of my little things was, okay, like one metric was, all right, they're going to start accepting your stories, and maybe you might start like winning some prizes. And so that first story, the title story, The One's Gonna Say They Love You, I remember I wrote that story, it got rejected 18 times, and then I was like, well, this is not going to work. Then I put it in 4 contests. It came in second place in one of the contests. And then this crazy voice, which I imagine is the same voice that speaks to that guy, Kanye. The voice is like, yo, Maurice, I know you came in second place, dog. Yo, fam, that's good, man. But look, withdraw that story, fam. But I already got second place. Nah, bro, take the story out. So I wrote an email to the contest and said, I'm taking my story back from the contest. Keep your $500. And I'm sure they were like, who is this guy? About a week later, I get a call from the editor at the Iowa Review, which is the #1 magazine theoretically in America. They're like, hey, you just won our prize. If I had not withdrawn that story, it would be a second place story as opposed to a first place story about the highest ranking magazine. So there's that little, the ancestors, the spirits, the universe, fate, whatever it is always talking to you. You must listen to it. Otherwise, you're messing up,
Yeah, you gotta trust your gut.
Trust it. Yeah.
So, when you're writing a story, so you have these 4 rules, and I made you a T-shirt with the 4 on them. So,
I should have wore it.
well, I mean, it's it's a little chilly.
Yeah.
But first, tell them what the 4 steps are, and then I'm gonna ask my question.
Yeah, so I did one of those personality tests years ago. It was one of the off-brand ones. It wasn't like the Briggs Myers. It was like one of the cheap ones because my firm sponsored it. The firm had a retreat, and we were going to test all you lawyers to see what your personalities are like. And so it was like yellow, blue, red, green. It was green, blue, red, and yellow. And so it was like analytical, structural, social, and creative. And so most of the lawyers in the top half, you know, they're analytical and they're very organized. And almost nobody had like yellow, creative, or red, social. I was right in the middle. I was like right in the actual middle of all 4 of the quadrants. I'm like, what does that even mean? How do you use that to your advantage? So, wait, what was the question? What was the question?
So your setup for writing a story, you have 4 things.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, the structural and analytical part of me is always trying to figure out how things are done. So I know that in my early writing life, which was like a 10-year period of like writing and not getting anything published, and like feeling sad a lot. Because I'm like, I'm never gonna be able to write these stories, you know? And that's like, all right, try to take what you've read, the craft books, the short story collections, the novels, the movies you've seen, whatever, and figure out like commonalities and things that just make sense. You can sort of deploy them in the moment when you're writing. And so I did this thing where I said, okay, what are 4 basic rules for every story that I've tried to write? And basically it is, I mean, it's super simple. It is setup, wait, try this. Setup, complication, ironic twist, conclusion. So the setup is just, it's the journalistic questions. What, where, when, how, and why, right? And often you can even like cut a lot of it out. You can just like save it for later in the story if you want to. And then complication is, things got complicated, whatever that is. You know, you wanted a glass of water, they gave you a glass of gin, but you're a friend of Bill W, whatever, like you can't drink it. And therefore, there's a conflict, and out of that conflict, you just bring in some ironic twist. And maybe the twist is that if you drink that glass of gin or whatever it is, it will save the universe, and I'm being ridiculous, but the point is, you know, by having that structure there, I could always kind of go, I'm not sure where this story is right now. Well, have you figured out what the ironic twist is? Oh, that's a good question. And maybe the story won't have the twist like that, but it just helped me to talk to my students and myself about how to stop being, the artsy part of your brain is really important, but the getting stuff done part of your brain is even more important. Because the universe of words is vast and infinite. It goes to the other side of the galaxy, the other side of the actual multiverse, which is infinite. And therefore you need just very concrete, specific techniques just to get it down as fast as possible.
Got you. So, what does revision usually look like for you?
Remember how your mama would tell you to clean your room when you was a kid? Revision is like the opposite. You go in that room, all the toys are in the chest, you know, everything, like the clothes are folded up, you know, the curtains are drawn. It's like just rip everything, just start tearing stuff out, throwing toys over the place, you know, putting Play-Doh paint on the wall, just making it as messy as possible. You're trying to figure out what is there and why it's there. You're trying to figure out what's working and what's not working. And that's a process of like giving it to your friends, you know, sending it over to you or to Emily or to Kayla or somebody like that, and making sure that when that person talks to you, they're like, all right, usually what I ask nowadays is, what would you absolutely keep, what would you have to get rid of, and what is confusing to you? And those 3 questions kind of encompass what you should know as a writer. And of course, if you ask, 10 opinions, you're going to get like 10 different opinions, which is also a valuable thing. Somebody may say, that lady who's the main character in the story, I don't know about that. But if you're like, that's the whole point of the story, you have to make a decision. You either keep that lady as the main character, or you kind of go, as always, Carrie was right, I'm going to have to cut that character out and move on to a better version of the story. But my point is like, for me, revision is like it's one of the most fun things. For me, the first fun thing is like finding that proper voice. I'm writing and writing and writing, and then like there's a quickening where it's like, oh, that's who's really talking to me right now. It's like when Whoopi Goldberg hears Patrick Swayze in Ghost. She's like, whoa, what was that? It's that same sort of vibe. And then as I move into the story, it's like, oh, okay, I thought I was flying pretty high, but now I'm flying real high and real fast. And that's like this sort of feeling of like, I know what I'm doing. And then the revision is like, all right, that 30 pages out of the 300-page manuscript no longer belongs. And having like the courage to say, just cut that, put it somewhere else, you don't need it. That's real power as a writer, because we can all write. I'm sure that anybody in this room who's a writer can write. But revisions where you really like can make the thing shine and sparkle and have that good McHardy's chicken flavor.
So in the collection, you have short stories, and you have a lot of flash fiction in here too. When you're using those 4 steps to come up with the characters, the idea, revision, I guess, I mean, I'm gonna assume your answer is to trust your gut, but how do you know, like when you're ending your stories, how do you know when to end them versus, you know, like, because I'm trying to write short stories, it's so weird.
You're writing some stories.
You have to do stuff in stories. Poems is feelings, but
They can't say beautiful, provocative
I
things.
know, they have to like move. But when you're writing a story, are you ever afraid, oh no, I haven't written to the end or I've overwritten it? And yeah, what do you really think about in those moments?
I mean, look, during that 10-year dry spell, my main problem was overwriting. Every story was 25 pages long. Every story had like a page and a half to 5 pages of, hey, I bet you're wondering how I got in this situation. Let me tell you all about it. It was that kind of thing. And then like, you know, like a 5-act structure. This thing happens, then it happens over in this escalation, come to Jesus talk. Every single story was the exact same thing. And it was like, no, you can back off. What I realized is that a story is really done when you just can't touch it anymore. It's like if you have had a good dinner with your friends and you like, man, that chicken was so good, and that daiquiri was so good, and you're like, yo, family, got another piece over there, and you're like, no, like that. It's almost the exact same feeling. And so I noticed it first when I had finished at UNO, had my thesis, and I was like, I should try and get some of these stories and publish them and like revise them first. And I remember going to my laptop and having this feeling of like, it's like trying to kiss your sister. I mean, it was, and like not like a friendly sister, but like a, you don't want to do that. Never. What I'm saying is, it just felt off. It's like if your sister was like playing like your romantic counterpart in a film. Like, why would you do that to somebody? So that.
Twin, what are you doing?
Maybe 1 or 2 more questions for the Q&A out here in the audience. But my point being, so now what I figured out is that like when I'm writing something, 1 or 2 things happens. I get to the point where it's like this icky feeling of don't touch it anymore and leave it on the side forever. Like there's stories that will never see the light of day because I just can't work on them anymore. I can't fix them. Or there's things where it's like, that's the state of the art. Like you were actually on your game. And you sent out for a few people looking at it and giving you comments, and you've gotten comments back, and it feels like you made it the best it could be. And at a certain point, you're changing it to make changes, but you're not making it any better. You're making it different, but not better. And so my thing is always, what's my intention? It changes throughout the creation of the work. My original intent is never the same as my final intent. But at some point, I'm like, oh, that's it. That chicken tastes real good. If I like start to add like pepper jelly and cardamom to it, it's like you're just making a different recipe at that point. So just stop. Y'all didn't expect that. There's a lot of twists and turns there.
There's like 2 more questions, and then we can open it up to audience questions. This next question, I guess, is a 2-parter. Oh no, I forgot the question. No, okay, I got it. So, you said that, so there are some stories, okay, maybe 3 more questions. So, with the collection, since you wrote it and then some time passed before it was published, what's the, I guess, oldest and what's the newest story in the collection?
Probably the oldest story is The Pie Man. It's one with the kid, baby, meets his father for the first time, and it's like this sort of relationship of like mentorship. So that story, a lot of my stories are remixes. That story was based on Faulkner's Dry September, in which a bunch of anti-Semitic white Southerners attack a Jewish flower shop owner. And I think it like starts in a barber shop, something like that. I'm like, all right, let me try to write my own version of that. So my original version was the exact same story, except it was like, now it was brothers attacking a Jewish guy. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense in New Orleans. I'm not sure why. So I just changed the entire thing around. I'm like, well, it's 2007, 8. I've seen some tension firsthand between like brothers who are like trying to get jobs post-Katrina, like to repair buildings, and immigrants coming in the city and like trying to get the exact same jobs. And I'm like, all right, you can work with that. And so that story was me. It took 5 years to write that story. I was still new. I didn't know what I was doing. I kept going back to my friend Tad, read like an early draft, like 2008 or something, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I realized there was one story that it would haunt me. If I had stopped writing it, I would still be trying to write it today. And so I just kept going back to it. I scrapped like 4 drafts of it. I changed the main character. Oh my goodness. You know what the main character's original name, I'm so embarrassed to say this out loud. The main character's original name was Hooker Lee Jr. Yes. I'm like, what are you doing, bro? They ain't no Hooker Lee's in New Orleans. Like Alabama, maybe. Maybe Florida. North Carolina, not New Orleans. So I kept making those kind of little adjustments to like make it more like, again, like us, as opposed to Alabama, right? I know. My bad. My best student over there. But anyway, so yeah, that was it.
You asked them about oldest and
Oh
newest.
yeah, what's the newest one? Thank you.
The newest story is kind of a tie between Rhinoceros, I think, and also Cesar Pittman. So Rhinoceros is, so this book was being finished in 2020. I'm at the Grisham House in Mississippi at Ole Miss. And so I'm writing that post George Floyd protest during the pandemic. So in that story, they go to a George Floyd protest and they're like wearing masks through most of the story. So that story is like, it's now in the city of New Orleans as you could possibly get. And then Cesar Pittman, I think with that story, maybe it was that one. I feel like there's another story in there that I was still working on like the last possible second, like just tinkering with it to make it a little bit tighter. It was probably before I let go. Like that story was like a 1.5-year process. And I just kept feeling like it's not quite hitting the right mark. Oh, I know. And I kept like cutting it. It was like actually like 80 pages. And that was like 38 pages.
Like a little novella.
It really was. I'm like, nah, I don't need this part and those 20 pages. I kept cutting and cutting and cutting. Yeah.
What are you are writing the draft of American Daughters.
Mm-hmm.
What's that like? What's that like moving on? Do you feel like you have to let go of like a previous thing before you start on the new piece of writing?
I say that I have to let go of things, but the truth of the matter is my best writing is when I'm kind of overworked a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like I wrote my first TV pilot scripts in October. I took 1 month to write 2 scripts. And I'm writing that while my agent has The American Daughters. And I'm like just like sweating. I'm like, is this book gonna sell? Like, will it find a good publisher? Like, will I be like out on the streets, basically, metaphorically? Like, well, just write some screenplays really fast. And that nervous energy. So for me, it's always, you know, our friend Jamie Hadley would always say, it's not the main thing that often hits. It's like your side projects that hit. So I have like, you know, always 10 side projects going at the exact same time. Because again, you know, we can't predict the future, but we can put the effort in to create the future.
Mm-hmm.
I think let's.
Someone tweet that real quick.
And then this is the fun one, and then Q&As. If you had to take a writer, dead or alive, if you could take any writer to the movies, which writer and what movie would you make them watch with you?
I know. I want to say Toni Morrison.
I knew you were gonna say
but,
that.
but I feel like she would just like.
She
would like just stare at me. She'd be like,
Don't waste my
Lord. And then I'd be like, what you think about it? She wouldn't even say anything. She'd
She'd be
walk
like,
out.
you think you're the center, but you're
Yeah,
not.
no. Oh. Nabokov. Because he'd be wilding out. Like in the movies, he would just be like, you Americans.
What movie would you make him watch?
Lolita.
He'd be so mad. I can't bring him to see Lolita. Yeah. I would probably bring him to see something crazy. Like, I don't know. Oh, I know. He would have so many comments about Avengers Infinity War. He'd just be like,
Avengers Infinity War.
yeah, he would just be like this whole like American hegemony and like the advertisers like within the work and like the misogyny and the patriarchy and it's like so basic, you know, this is not a real story, you know, it's like part of like 20 stories stacked. I think it'd be interesting.
Well, let's end on that note and have Q&A, but let's give Maurice a big round of applause.
So anybody have any answers out there? Any answers for us? We want all the answers. Give us the answers, please. Or questions.
I just wish you'd grill them harder.
Thank you.
I'm feeling so nice.
I have a question for you on Ghetto University, because when I was reading it, I was actually casting it in my head. I thought it would make a wonderful short film, but you did mention that you use relatives and friends and all that. So is there anyone specific for the 2 main characters or the I don't want to spoil it, but the last characters?
Well, I mean, for Ghetto University, I mean, that one is probably the second most autobiographical story. I didn't rob anybody. Feds, I didn't rob anybody. Feds, I didn't rob anybody. But that's really like me and my wife, basically. Like our weird adventures, we're both like professional people. But it's like we have this sort of dark side, like this dark gallows humor. It's like, you know that guy over there who asked you for $1? I bet he has $10 he's gotten today. You could take that $10 right now. It's like, okay, that's a good idea. So there's that aspect of it. But also, good to see you in real life, by the way. Ghetto University is a story for me where I was pushing the limits of how many plot twists you can have in one story. It's like there's a plot twist on like every other page in that story, if not more than that. And I couldn't publish it. I sent it to people to publish. I got rejected like 20 times. And then when it got published in the book, I've gotten more like DMs, like in Instagram and Twitter for that story, anything I've written. People are like, this is a wild story, son. And what were you drinking? Drinking water, pretty much? It's a wild story. But I wrote that story in the run-up, I think, to the 2016 election. And my dad just passed like a year before that. So honestly, I was angry. I was like, let me just put this into a story, like have it come out, these inappropriate, phrases and ideas, just see where it goes. But who would I cast? I mean, I think for a lot of my stories, Donald Glover of Atlanta fame is like one of the best versions. Like he would be like a good We Cast a Shadow narrator. He'd be a good, like several of my characters. He could do those characters. And then for her, I mean, Tessa Thompson, Lupita Nyong'o. I mean, just beautiful, brilliant black ladies. What can I say? Yeah. Thank you. Other questions?
Okay, so you mentioned that actually this is kind of a question for both of you. You mentioned in one of your answers that you shared like one of your own poems with your students, and I am always wondering about that. I guess I'm just wondering about like maybe both of y'all's philosophies around like what role you play in the creative writing classroom and like to what extent you feel comfortable sharing your work or like that can be productive. So yeah, just wondering about that.
So the idea of like sharing your work with your students when you are the professional and the expert, I mean, I think we have different ideas about this.
But with poetry, I was so surprised that my students wanted me to bring in a poem of mine, because if anybody's been in that class where the professor has assigned their own textbook and you're like, oh. But, I'm like, and I never wanted to be that type of person. But, I think it definitely differs because it's a creative, it's creative work. And, I mean, you're already teaching them, and teaching is just your own opinions anyway. For me, I think last semester, they asked me on the last day of class, I had everybody go around and read either a poem of theirs in a workshop that they revised or a poem by someone that they liked. And they were like, you need to read something from your book. I'm like, oh, okay. So they sort of put me on the spot.
They commanded it.
Yeah, I think it can be helpful because to see someone who is teaching them actively doing the thing that they're teaching and what they want to do as well. But I feel like my role, you said the role of the instructor in the classroom? I feel like this is going to sound, to facilitate creativity, and what I mean is that on the first day I always tell them, they can write whatever they want. It takes them a while to believe me, but once they do believe me, they do it. And I'm like, you can write about whatever you want. I'm not here to constrict you. I think it's really important for you to teach the student and give them feedback from a world in which like the poem lives, not you need to really make it clear that it's like, I am here to help you, and it doesn't matter if I quote unquote like or not like, because that's subjective anyway. But I have them at the beginning of the workshop tell me what things they want us to talk about, because in some workshops you'll have the person read their work and then they have to sit for 10 to 15 minutes in silence while everyone's talking around them like they don't exist, and I don't like that. So I want them to put their needs first and tell us so that we can cater our comments to them, because their voice is the most important. I'm obsessed with their obsessions. I think they are so much more interesting than me, so I want them to be able to speak freely and not feel like there's one way or another, and to just do what they want and learn how to know which comments they can take to help their revision process.
Yeah, we have the same thoughts, I think, the same philosophy. My only job is to empower these writers. And I think sometimes people have been teaching for a long time, they may get this sense of like, well, I'm above you or I'm separate from you. And it's like, well, no, we're all beginning in some way. That's why I'm always like starting new like craft skills. That's why I'm trying to be a poet. I'm trying to like do pottery one day, and whatever. Because that gives you this humility to go, okay, it's not that big of a difference. So one of my mentors is this guy named Wells Tower, and what he did when I took his workshop in Arkansas in 2011, he gave us a really bad story. He's like, read this story. We read it, we're like, man, that story sucks. And he's like, that's my story. We're like, no. And I remember reading it, I was like, this story feels familiar. In his collection, I was reading it while I was there, I'm like, oh, this is that story before we revised it. Yeah. And so for my first 3 years of teaching at LSU, I would not assign him my own work. But I'm also like an iconoclast, and I'm also like an experimenter, like a scientist. I want to know what effects do your choices have. And so I was like, ask my fellow colleagues, like, okay, how would y'all feel if I start assigning this book to my students, my short stories? And they're like, oh, you can't do that. That's awful. You're going to be that guy. But then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try it for 1 year and see how it goes. And so I assigned this book the fall of 2021 for a year. My best semesters ever. I got like my best, I went from being like an average ranking persons, like above average. And the reason why that was is because it was two things was happening. One, they got to see who I really am, like how my brain works. You know, we don't want to admit this as writers, but you can smell your book, they're seeing inside your brain, like a part of your brain. So they're like, oh, that's who this guy is. Because the shell says one thing, the word says something else. But then secondly, I'm always like, you know, this work is not perfect, so I will give them like earlier drafts, and I will like say, this is where I messed up. And one of my great pleasures is that in the past, during that year, I had one student, in each class, write a better version of my own story. And one of them got published, and the other one won the university prize. So I'm like, I mean, you know, that's my point made. You know, it's not that I'm so great, it's that we need to be in communication constantly. And so just, you know, I want them to feel empowered. I want them to feel like they're having a good time. I think joy is underrated in writing. This idea of like, you know, freezing in a garret, you know, in Paris or something, in a 15 Ardise ball or whatever like that. No, I mean, that's fine, you know, freezing in a garret, but, you know, have a good time with writing, because I always say, like, from a psychological perspective, you will keep doing what you enjoy doing, you will stop doing what you don't enjoy doing. And I see too many grad students leave the programs and just stop writing. It's like, no. This is your heart, these are your obsessions. We need you in the communities writing your stories for all of us as much as possible. Rant.
Thank you.
What's up, brother?
Hey, what's up? So you guys have such like a sibling relationship, and I heard you say earlier you kind of dabble into poetry and you've kind of dabbled into short stories.
Yeah.
So like, what connects you guys so well as writers?
Oh my God.
You
Well,
want to say that's cousin right?
yo, that's my cousin.
That's a cousin.
It was, when we met, it was weird. Like for a moment, we really thought we were siblings. And we pulled out photos of our father to make sure it wasn't the same.
Yeah, because like you're like. So first of all, as you can probably tell, we're both like super nerds, which most writers are nerds, right? Like we love like information and ideas and the written word, you know. And when I was a kid, I would buy comics. This before it was cool. I was an early adopter. No, anyway, back in the 80s, I'd go to a comic book shop and I would have like a little folder with my comics in it. And so I remember I would go there. So my mom would go like to Sally's Beauty Supply. I'd go in the comic book shop. But in the meantime, your mom was going in the same shop in the same year.
Oh wait, no, that. Okay, no.
I'm playing with you.
No, I know what.
Yeah, I'm playing with you.
I know.
I'm playing with you.
No.
No, the real actual thing is what?
Randomly, my mom met him right before I was born. They weren't, no.
No. Hey, I thought I was way out with the system.
No. But, where'd you work? Circuit City?
Circuit City.
Circuit City, right? He used to work at Circuit City, right?
Way back.
Way back. When the dinosaur, no. And it was the Circuit City in the East, right?
Yes.
And so I was talking to you on the phone about something, and my mom was like, oh yeah, maybe I met Maurice before. Like, I went to go get a phone. And I'm like, you didn't, that wasn't him from And then it's like, oh yeah, like she went to go get a phone. He's like, I worked the table by the phones. I was like, I remember somebody there named Mo. He was like, yes, they called me Mo. So I think it was predestined that we were to meet.
But also,
and we met when
2009.
When I was
I think
in
it's me, you, and Jamie. We were at
I
the
was an
Chase Williams
8th grader.
Yes.
And you were a grown man. But
we're like 18 years different apart.
Yeah.
But the three of us are sitting in this. I think it was the Treme TV show panel.
We met at the we
with
met
David
at the
Simon.
Tennessee Williams Festival.
We didn't actually meet though.
But we were in the same area.
Well, what happened was we're sitting next to each other, and there's this little girl with her mama. No, just you.
Field trip.
Field trip.
It was just me and other
so we
students.
found out like 12 years later that we were in the same room, like 5 feet apart, for like 2 hours.
You're a really brilliant panel.
Yeah, we were.
That panel produced thousands of writers. Now I don't know.
No, I stopped. What's his name? David Simon.
David Simon.
I stopped him when he was like walking down the aisle. I was like, hey.
That was you?
Sign my script.
You didn't
So
sign
now
that
I
part of the
have a signed copy. So if I ever need money.
So me, Jamie, and Emily were walking out. We were talking smack about the panel, and we saw somebody go up to David, and we were like that. That was you.
Yeah. You can't deny a kid an autograph.
That's true. So the similarities are there's a level of obsession over like what do you call it? Specialty topics.
Our special interest topics.
Special interest topics. Like you pick a thing you want to write into that thing, whatever that thing is. It becomes part of the poetry, a part of like the fiction. But then also like just being like a little. I mean, look, Alice Walker talked about this with her short story, Everyday Use. It's this idea of like, often the creators in the community, particularly the literary creators, who have to leave the community to get education. You went to New York City, for example, right? And you come back, you're kind of an outsider. but you also know your people better than anybody else. And so in that story, she's showing that tension between like knowing and loving your people, but also feeling like off to the side of it. And then some of that in us too, I think, to be a little bit personal about it. I mean, we got the same glasses pretty much.
Same birthday,
I wasn't going to
same
admit it. This is
glasses.
my second pair. I bought this like a month ago, and I was like, I'm going to get the one she got.
Yeah, we both came see, we have the same birthday. Anime.
Everything. Everything.
I think it was a hand in the corner.
Yes.
So with One Book, One New Orleans, there may be thousands of people reading your book this coming year, discussions, events, things around it. What are your hopes for that? For whether it's One Book, One New Orleans, your hopes there, or hopes for your book, your stories, your words?
Wonderful question. I think we'll do one more after this one, and we'll wrap it up. What are my hopes for what happens with this? So there's a part of me that's like when I was in grad school, I would walk into the class and I just feel like full of like low self-esteem because I'm a 33-year-old man going to my first year of grad school. People in the class like mostly 25 years old, and like they've been like writing their whole lives. They like come from families like writers in the families. I'm this black kid from New Orleans East. I've been reading a long time. I've been writing unsuccessfully, not publishing. So just like feeling this sense of like I don't know what I'm doing. And that love of like writing has been a part of my entire life. Like going to like book fairs in like 5th grade, like buying like the Guinness Book of World Records and the Garfield comic anthology, and it's like reading it from the entire book in like 2 hours at home, that kind of thing. It's that love. But also this feeling of like, this is a city where we're known for our food, we're known for our music, we're known for like sort of our style, like our language. But because of a lot of reasons, a lot of complicated reasons, there's not a lot of people like me and her who are writing books and getting published nationally and internationally. And it's like, this reason is like how publishing works in New York City, to mass incarceration in the state, to underfunding in the schools in the city itself, plus racism in the schools, where you have a public system that's like 99%, 95% black, and a private system that's like, 20% black. It's like, well, why is that? Something's going on there. So the short version of the answer to that is this. I want to write a book that's so, if there's like some young black child, 8 years old, 15 years old, 19 years old, they read it and they have one or two responses. This is great, I want to be like this in the future. Or, this is all right, I can do way better myself in the future. Write my own book in the future. And so, with this program, which is providing books to many adults, it's the exact same thing. Again, I was an adult learner who became an adult writer. I wasn't writing short stories when I was 15 years old. And so my belief is that anybody who wants to learn the craft and lean into that spiritual voice that wants to tell these stories and pass them forward, you can do it when you're 50, you can do it when you're 60, when you're 80. If you're incarcerated, you can do it. If you have some sort of mental illness, you can deal with that and write. It's out there for all of us. I just hope that to a certain extent, if my legacy is being like a trailblazer in some sense, in some small sense, that's a victory. In the meantime, I'm just grateful that the book is going to have a wide audience here in the city. And lastly, I'm the kind of writer where I want my work to do no harm and as much good as possible. And I think that this book, is going to do that, I hope. And so I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Yes, thank you. All right, Nordette.
For both of you. Okay, so often writers, when they're reading, sometimes they have trouble turning off the writer brain when they're reading a book. So do you remember when you started reading like a writer? And now, do you have trouble sometimes turning it off? Are there books that can just still suck you in and you forget you're a writer, you're gone with it?
Oh, that's such a good question.
It took me a long time to figure out how to read like a writer. I'm not afraid to admit that when I was in undergrad, taking English at UNO in the late 90s, I had wonderful professors, Professor McGaw, I can still see like all their faces, Professor Dan Dahl, and like these wonderful books, wonderful stories, and they try to break it down. And I'm a pretty good student. Like my personality profile is student basically. I love to talk in classes, but I didn't really have any answers. Like they would say, class, why is it in Moby Dick, the guy Ishmael is on the top of the mast and he's throwing poetry and he's seeing the eagles and the whales, and I would kind of like give a BS answer. I didn't really understand anything. Now I can read most things and kind of go, oh, I see why they're doing this. I see how this connects to the history of patriarchy in Western civilization over a 400-year period, and yada yada yada, and these kind of things. And so what I would do is I would get books and I would at work, on the clock as a lawyer, like open my drawer up and just be writing notes in the margins, right? And years of doing that like changed my brain. I became able to like just understand things a lot better. Now as a writer, it can be hard to turn that brain off sometimes. But what I will say is like the best writing, like my favorite writing, it overcomes that. It's like I mean, even things like out of genres that I don't read as much. Like I don't read that much commercial, but like reading Little Fires Everywhere and being like, I'm on page 200. I forgot I started reading this book. I've forgotten I was trying to break it down, like what the plot structure and like sort of characterizations, that kind of stuff. It just, to me, is good classic writing. So I can turn it off if I have to, but it can be a struggle sometimes. But it's okay. It all comes together. And I think I like movies because as a movie viewer, I can't break it down to the same level as I can do books. It's like, he used this lens and this camera, and it was that kind of lighting, that kind of stuff. Yeah. How about you?
I was gonna say that
twins.
A lot of the times it happens when I'm watching TV and movies. If you're watching a movie, stop it at the 11-minute mark. The inciting incident should have happened by then. That brings it forward. So I did that when I saw Glass Onion. And I was like, okay, because it's also, I'm revising a TV pilot that I wrote, so I'm like, all right, I have, yes.
Excellent TV writer. Excellent TV writer.
Yeah. But for me, it's when I'm watching TV and movies because I love when I'm writing to create a backstory about a character, whether it goes into the thing or not. I love the world building. And for me, and we've talked about this, setting for me is like a big thing. I think setting happens before I come up with the character because it's like, what type of person would survive in this setting? So that's why setting always comes first. I get the character out of the place. But for me, I'm always like, okay, I see how the characters fed us breadcrumbs so that when we get to the end of like the episode or the end of the movie, it's like, oh, was I expecting that plot twist? But for poetry, I realize sometimes I try to guess how I think the poems are going to end, which is not good to do because poetry is about the discovery and you have to trust someone to take you on a ride, right? So I feel like in general, I'm amazed and surprised, and you have to be because writing is, I don't know, you're just creating your own world and everything else. I don't want to go into much detail. I'm a poetry nerd. I could just talk and talk, but I try to guess poem endings based on like the themes I see show up, and I also focus a lot on line breaks because I'm like, are you forcing me to think this way? Are you giving me the whole thing in one breath? So, but
you are the first person I've ever heard of guessing the end of a poem. That is remarkable. We got some friends. We go to the movies with them, and they'll like guess the end of the film, like in the first act. And we're like, oh, there she go again. But the end of the poems, that's a special interest topic of building.
I'm a poetry teacher.
All right. Well, look. On that note, thanks for your patience. Please have some more chicken and buy as many books as possible from this bookstore. Thank y'all.
Number one, get more food. No one wants to take it home, not me. February 9th, if you would like to plan events such as this one, if you'd like to help us plan and execute our community programming, please watch our Facebook, our Insta, our Twitter, and our newsletter. If you're on it.
Volunteers needed.
Volunteers needed. Speaking of, guys, if you were served food or if you were checked in tonight, those were volunteers. Can we please give it up?
All right.
This event will be on our One Book One New Orleans YouTube channel very soon, thanks to Litwire New Orleans. Sean, thank you very much for the outro. Thanks to our board of directors. We got 5 of them in the house, y'all. We got Jenny, Liz, Latoya, and Victor. Thank y'all for being here, for helping us today. And last but not least, guys, Mama Vera and Mama Jen at Community Book Center. Thank you all for coming out. We'll see you soon. Have a safe and happy Mardi Gras.
We have a request. Wait, stop. Don't go anywhere.
We're going to get a picture of all y'all.
Yeah.
Y'all look so good tonight. We want to remember tonight. Which one is it?
Sorry, y'all.
We want to take a selfie with y'all, so just pose.
Selfie.
You have longer arms.
All right. Now look, this is what I need y'all to do. All right. Make sure that you like put like your schoolhouse faces on. I don't want like no weird faces. This is the background. All right. All right.
All right, everybody ready? Hold it.
One more.
One more.
All right. Thank y'all so much. Good night.